Hello everyone, welcome to Matrix Uploaded. It's English and we're doing writing and presenting, and our focus is summary writing. You know what a summary is? It's a shortened version of a longer passage. So we're going to do quite a bit of practice to see how good you're at this. We're starting with a passage called Visual Arts Tour. I want to read it through and then we'll talk about how to summarize it. What a wonderful cultural experience to visit a country renowned for its magnificent history, art and culture. On our arrival in Rome, we were whisked off in a coach to our first tour with our guide, Sylvia. We walked the streets of Rome and visited the Spanish Steps and thereafter the Trevi Fountain. This is where the cool, refreshing water from the fountain was our first experience of Italy's welcoming water that is available to tourists in various spots. We also had our first Italian ice cream, the famous gelato, which truly does warrant its popularity. Out of this world, flavors of all sorts available, and a melt-in-the-mouth experience. Hot and tired, we enjoyed our ice creams in a spot of shade. The streets of Rome led us to the Colosseum, the Forum, and into the Vatican City. Inside the Colosseum, our guide outlined the lively history, fights, deaths, and triumphs that had taken place several hundreds of years ago. Here we were, our feet walking on the same ground that these people had walked on. Within the Vatican City, we feasted our eyes on the famous works by Michelangelo. After a long walk past a vast array of sculptures, mosaics, tapestries, and architectural features within the Apostolic Palace that houses the Sistine Chapel, we turned our heads up to admire the ceiling of this legendary chapel. Breathtakingly beautiful, it is truly amazing. Moving on to the St. Peter's Church, we saw the Pieta sculptured from marble by Michelangelo at the young age of 22 years, and the 30-meter-high canopy, the baldacchino, which stands over the site of St. Peter's tomb. Right, now that looked like quite a lot of information. It's about 269 words, so if we're going to summarize it, usually you do it in 1/3 of the original. So we're looking at about 90 words. Where do you start? Start with saying what in 1 or 2 or 3 words was this passage about? Well, it was about a visit to Rome. Can you remember anything in particular about the main points in that visit to Rome? Well, yes. One is they walked along the streets of Rome, and those streets led them to, remember any of the details? Well, there was a mention of the Spanish Steps and the Trevi Fountain. Do you remember there was something about the welcoming waters of Rome? And this was the first example of the welcoming waters, the Trevi Fountain. They also said that they had ice cream, have to have the famous ice cream in Rome, so we remember that. And then we moved on to going through the streets to, perhaps we should do it this way, to famous sites. And those famous sites included, do you remember, we had the Colosseum and the Forum, and then quite a bit of time was spent in the original passage discussing going to the Vatican City. Now, if we look at that, these are all examples. And what you might say to yourself is, you know in a summary that there should be no examples. So how much of that do I include? What you could do is try to sum it up. They went along the streets of Rome and they visited popular tourist sites, and then famous places, if we don't want to use the word sites again, famous places. But I think you're going to have to give a little bit more detail. And this is where you're going to have to start to guess. How much of that detail do I include in the summary? Because I have to choose the key points, otherwise I'm going to lose marks. So what you do here is, we're told a little bit about the Colosseum, about the famous people, that were mentioned that were part of the Colosseum or that been to the Colosseum. The Forum we didn't hear very much about, but we did hear quite a lot about the Vatican City. So I think you would at this point go back to your passage and say, okay, what did they do? What did they see? So if you remember again from your passage, there was quite an emphasis on the artwork of Michelangelo and something to do with the palace in the Vatican City and the Sistine Chapel. Now at this point, you need to write it out. We've got 90 words. That's quite a lot of words. So you would write it out and see how many words do I have. And then you would add in some of those extra details, like the ice cream, like the Trevi Fountain, like Michelangelo. And we're going to continue with summary writing in the next segment.